Hey, what's up, everybody? Raider Nation, my name is Anthony Alves on a Monday morning, a day off, a day removed from the Raiders getting demolished by the Philadelphia Eagles 31 nothing from Lincoln Financial Field. Second Raiders defeat where they were shut out earlier in the season was the Kansas City Chiefs who did it at Arrowhead. So twice this season, the Raiders been shut out 31 nothing. Very embarrassing defeat for the Raiders. You got Max Crosby bickering against Devin White. Something that you don't want to see, but you got to understand it though. Max Crosby wants production from his teammates, trying to make stops. He went into the game hoping for a win, and it's another loss where they dropped to 2-12, and now they're near the top of the NFL draft. Where if they finish number one, they got to go. If Fernando Mendoza opts out and goes into the draft, that's who the Raiders need to select. But nonetheless, what I want to talk about is what's going on with the Raiders. Pete Carroll for the yesterday, Hunter Carpenter asked him a question about a whole. If he didn't really ask him like, did you lose a team? But Pete Carroll thought that this question was geared to. I kind of think that's the question was geared to that as well. Uh, and Carroll was very defensive about that. Defending his players. I wrote a story on Yard Barker talking about that. Losing a team like the Raiders, like Pete Carroll does or has, is not a good look at all. And you know, what do the Raiders do with him after the end of the season? Do they fire him? Um, you know, I'm going back and forth on this because you want stability, but at the same time, losing a football team is one thing. Um, so you got to take that into account where maybe the Raiders need a reset here and go to next season and try to figure it out. Um, because I think that Kevin Stefanski, just like NFL.com reported, or I think it was ESPN, one of those two. I forgot. I was reading about that earlier, and I forgot which reporter mentioned that Kevin Stefanski could be on his way out. That's something the Raiders who should look at, because you look at the Mike Rabel situation in Tennessee, where he ended up going to New England, and now in New England after a sorry season. As I was saying, the Patriots on the verge are in the playoffs. With the record, even though they lost to the Bills yesterday in a highly contested game, the Raiders could follow that kind of pattern what the Patriots did if they're able to make the right moves in the offseason. I don't see any reason why the Raiders can't duplicate what the Patriots did next year. And I think the Raiders, John Spytek needs to look at himself in the mirror and get this thing right. Because he was hired by the Raiders, especially Tom Brady, to come in and fix the Raiders because the Raiders are just been in shambles for a while, minus the playoff appearances in 2016 and also in 2021. And the Raiders just need a, excuse me, 2021 or 2023, one of those years, whatever. Uh, and so it just seems like forever already. But the Raiders, you know, they can't be making any more Alex Kappa type signings, as I alluded to yesterday on what do you call it, on Twitter, and just can't. And Spartak, I believe, learned his lesson from that. The Raiders are going to have a lot of money, cap space to go after free agents. They're going to have draft capital, so I think they're in a good spot right now as far as you know trying to get this you know in the right direction for the Raiders and for fans to feel comfortable, day in and day out, knowing that their team, are going to be a consistent winner. Because, bottom line, that's what you want: a consistent winner, not a consistent loser. Because if you're a consistent loser, then it carries on, and you don't want to have that. These Raiders are kind of reminding me of how Tampa Bay used to play back in the '80s. Then also the Saints, with those garbage, with those trash bags, or I mean, grocery bags, not trash bags. But you can also use trash bags, but it's embarrassing, and the Raiders, you know, you don't want to be, you don't want your team to be talked about by other fans because Raiders are a punchline, and the Raiders need to fix themselves quickly, led by John Spytek. No, Mark Davis too. Mark Davis needs to be serious about this. I'm not saying that he's not serious, but they got to figure this thing out. They got to go to the room, talk about this, and say, how are we going to get this right? How are we going to make the right moves? How are we going to entice free agents to come to Vegas? And you can't just you can't sell, oh, we have a great facility, we have a great weight room. No, it's all about winning in the NFL, winning Super Bowls. The Raiders haven't won a Super Bowl since the early 80s, and it's been a while. And the Raider Nation is sick and tired of waiting. You got some who are in their 20s, and now they're in the 50s, 60s, still haven't won or have been in playoffs, haven't won a Super Bowl, and now they're wondering if they're ever going to see their team in the Super Bowl again. You know, before we're all gone. That's the way it is in sports. You want to see your team be the consistent winner, make appearance in playoffs, and get to the championship and Super Bowl ultimately, or NBA Finals, whatever it may be. And so the Raiders need to figure this out quickly, because I don't think they got 2 to 3 years to figure this out. They got to bring in the right players and get this thing in the right ship starting next season and hopefully make the playoffs because as you guys all saw with Kansas City Chiefs, nothing lasts forever. And, with the Raiders, it seems like losing is lasting forever, unfortunately. And it's only up to the Mark Davis, Tom Brady, and John Spytek to make the right moves this time around. So that's what I have to say. My name is Anthony Galaviz. And by the way, again, Carol, I can't, you know, very defensive in that post game news conference yesterday about the whole, losing the team. You know, can't have players bickering against each other. Max Crosby done it already to Landon Roberts and now Devin White. All Crosby wants is for his teammates to make the right, plays, to be in the right situation to make tackles. Um, this needs to be fixed quickly. And it's up to the Raiders to get that done ASAP when the season is over with in several weeks.